Welcome to the Black Appalachian Coalition's podcast entitled Blac Re-Membering, where we will bring to you the heavy and the hope across the Ohio River Valley. We want to remember who we are, where we've come from. We want to speak to the oral history of what we've done, what we've achieved. We want to speak to the ills that we have experienced while also finding solutions to those problems, those issues. We want to deal with the narrative that has kept us deeply rooted in despair. Now we want to punch through that narrative and stand up and say, we are remembering our Black past, and we are rooted, and we are here to stay. Welcome to Blac Re-Membering. We hope that you find your place, your space, and your voice in this podcast.
I'm Tanya Whitfield. I'm with Blac Appalachian Coalition. I am their narrative organizer, and I have a great guest speaker, and he's going to introduce himself.
Hi, my name's John Cain, and I am the Kentucky Kids Eat Program Director for Feeding Kentucky. And Kentucky Kids Eat is the childhood hunger relief program of our state partner association to Feeding America, which Feeding Kentucky supports our member food banks. But we have a special focus on ending child hunger in Kentucky, and that's what Kentucky Kids Eat focuses on. I also am part or co-manage the No Kid Hungry Kentucky partnership campaign, which has been around for about a decade between Share Our Strength and Feeding Kentucky to end child hunger with that shared goal of ending child hunger in Kentucky.
So me and John, we have worked together on Zoom. That's we've met a couple of times in person.
Yes.
And his vibe is just hilarious, so I think this is going to be a great situation. So the first question is just knowing about you, like how you grew up. So you just kind of go with what you want to share. If you've always lived in Kentucky, if you've lived other places, just kind of give a couple of snippets of that.
Well, if you can't tell by my accent, I'm a native of Appalachia, Kentucky. I grew up in a little town called Buckhorn. Population, I think, currently about 82 people in the northwest corner, or the panhandle, as I like to say, of Perry County, which is Hazard is our county seat. And Buckhorn's about 28 miles from there. I grew up there. I lived there when I went off to college. I went to Central Kentucky. I went to college in Danville at Center College for my undergraduate degree. And then I spent a number of years in Lexington working on two masters at the University of Kentucky. And then I've also lived in Berea. I'm a physician assistant by training, so I practiced medicine for 15 years of my career. And I started out at White House Clinics in McKee in Jackson County, Kentucky. And I lived in Berea when I worked in McKee, and then there are other clinics in Berea and Richmond. And then I had a stint where I lived in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, when I worked for another healthcare organization after I transitioned into specialty diabetes care. I left the state and moved to North Carolina. I took a job as a diabetes and endocrine PA with the Wake Forest School of Medicine for a decade. And I left Kentucky back in 2013. And I returned home. I always say, as a native son of Appalachia, the mountains eventually beacon you home. You start hearing that signal, it's time to come home. And the mountains were calling me home. And I went back to Buckhorn, where I grew up. On the farm I grew up on is where I live now. Back in 2023, October, I moved back, and then I started with Feeding Kentucky about 2 months after that. I started in December of 2023. So soon after I got back to Kentucky, I took this role.
So how was it like growing up? Because like you said that, you've kind of been a little bit of everywhere, but predominantly in Kentucky. And so I could imagine the difference of places. And so I know like North Carolina definitely has to be one of the bigger places. And I guess Buckhorn would be one of the smaller places that you grew up.
Well, I grew up, I was surrounded by family where I grew up. So my paternal side of the family, the Cain family, lived on one side of the Middle Fork of the Kentucky River. And on the other side of that fork of the river, or the Middle Fork, was my maternal family, which is the Raleighs that my mother came from. So my grandparents lived across the river from each other, and my parents built a home and settled right in the middle there. So I had access to my grandparents. Now, I never knew my grandfather Cain. He passed the year before I was born, but my grandmother Cain was very influential in my life, and I was a senior in college when she passed away at the age of 99. But my grandmothers were very strong influences in my life, as well as extended cousins and aunts and uncles. Really, family was your social support system. Growing up in Appalachia was interesting. I went to school, K through 12, same school, in a little small community of Buckhorn, and you were just exposed to a lot of impacts of poverty. Now, I did not grow up in an impoverished home. That was not my upbringing. I mean, what you typically see on the media about Appalachia, that is not how I grew up. But all around me were folks that were living in poverty, and I got to see the impacts of poverty and the generational poverty that just passed down hand from one generation to the next, of folks that were just living well under what they need to survive and exist. And then I also got to see, federal programs, federal child nutrition programs, the best and worst of those programs, the people who do use those and use those well and critical. And then I also got to see some, signs of abuse of these programs, which gives me a very unique perspective as we're in this day and age where we're looking at cuts, trying to cut waste. That it's a very interesting experience that I had growing up. But my roots, I mean, my roots are firmly planted in Appalachia, Kentucky, and I remember that when I went off to center, and my accent was much stronger and my grammar was terrible. And I remember after about a month at center, the kids from Louisville and Lexington, they were having a field day with that little country bumpkin, that was in all their classes. And my freshman year at center, I decided I'd get in plays, socialize, meet people. And I was in the production of Cabaret. I was not a main character. I was, the drunken sailor was my role. But as part of that, I got to know a drama professor at that college. And once I felt like I could trust him, I went to him and I said, I'd like for you to help me lose my accent. And he asked me one of the most critical, I think probably one of the life defining moments of my whole life, about accepting who I was. He said, "Why do you want to lose your accent?" And I said, "I'm not taken seriously as an intellectual." And he said, "John, your accent is your heritage. That's who you are. That's who made you. And to lose your accent would be a disservice to the mountains and the people of the mountains that raised you. What you need to do is clean up your grammar, and then you can help debunk myths about people with your accent learning, speaking correctly." And I just always, when folks will tell me, "Well, boy, you really are from Kentucky," they'll say, which usually Kentucky's not my first guess. Usually it's Alabama or Tennessee. I get quite a bit. Alabama is the most often one. But folks will identify that I'm probably from somewhere in the South. If you know the dialects very well, they'll know it's Appalachia, Kentucky. But I've never really been ashamed of it, and I kind of wear that proudly as a badge now, because most folks will recognize the guy with the funny accent. If I go somewhere, I go to a national conference, or somewhere, that's my characteristic. That it defines me and sets me apart, because I do sound different, but who I am, part of it. I mean, it's been with me for 50 years, and I don't plan to use it. So growing up, every day as I go out in the real world and engage with the world outside of Appalachia, I take forward with me my upbringing and my heritage by just the way I look and sound.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So this question is kind of a little bit open, especially because you've lived in different parts of Kentucky. So, one of the main things we do is environmental. That's like our big preface. And I can imagine Appalachian, mountains, your air quality is different, how y'all
Mhm.
smell things. I mean, and I've just noticed, just from block to block, just where I live, there is differences. And I can't even imagine the mountains. So I would like you to help me and our listeners to like kind of break that down. Cause like you said, there's a lot of stereotypes, and some of them might be a little true. It might be ring a little true, but you're gonna be able
No, there's an
to
ounce of
kind of,
truth in
yeah.
every stereotype. I mean, it doesn't come out of nowhere. I always say, and I've lived in really three different parts of Kentucky. I've lived in Eastern Kentucky, I've lived in Central Kentucky, and I've lived in Northern Kentucky. And the socioeconomic status and the diversity of those areas that I live, has gone from very low diversity and low socioeconomic status of Eastern Kentucky. And I got a little, stepped up a notch when I went into the Central Kentucky area. But living in Fort Mitchell, one of the most affluent areas of the whole state, that it was, exposure to different resources and opportunities. I also went from very rural, where in Buckhorn we're a food desert. I'm 28 miles from a local grocery store. We're going to talk a little bit about summer meals today. Although I live 2 miles from the school, the road that gets you to my school was not safe enough to put sidewalks in for pedestrians. So there was no way for me to walk to get summer meals, even if I needed those, and my parents' work schedule wasn't conducive to that. So, you figure out ways to make that work. So you had weekly shopping trips, to the grocery store. You go to Hazard once a week to get everything you needed. And if you didn't have it on your list, you just waited till the next week when you went the next shopping trip. But being someone from a rural area that has returned to rural area, one of the things that I have noticed, particularly because I travel the state with this job and often are in grocery stores, is that an equity in grocery prices from all those locations I live. Like, the groceries are higher in Hazard than they are in Lexington. And I found groceries even less expensive in Northern Kentucky, that I thought in the areas of the most economically depressed populations have the highest grocery prices. And, when I would question folks and say, hey, why do we pay more for eggs? Why do we pay for a gallon of milk? And they say, well, it's the transportation to get you in here. And it's a real issue, because for folks that live on a fixed income, particularly senior citizens, I have noticed they have a lot of pride about asking for SNAP or for help, because they don't want a handout. They've worked all their life. They don't want something for nothing. But now there's that mobile market model that God's Pantry uses, where they go rolling through communities, that offers folks an equitable grocery price for produce and healthy food items. That's something that seniors in these rural populations would hop on, because they're paying something. It's not like they're getting it for free; they're paying. And I've been trying to hopefully engage. I was told that we have to get the mayor of Lexington, to let that mobile market roll into these rural areas that desperately need that for the equity and grocery pricing. Also, I went from rural to urban kind of living, and just the differences in growing up very rural, where there was no neighbors, and then you have living in, I guess it'd be kind of a townhouse I've moved into that had concrete all around you. Just the infrastructure, the resources around public transportation, social services. And I practice medicine in all these areas, and for my patients, I knew what resources were readily available. And I can tell you, rural patients, it was harder to navigate and make that system work, especially when it came to providing those support around social determinants of health, such as food access. Just getting folks transportation to and from a place to get a food or healthy food, particularly for those living with diabetes. I can remember vividly that was an added step for my urban patients who had access to public transportation. They knew that process was figured out. But for rural patients, I mean, it would require calling a community action agency and trying to navigate that process just to get them somewhere where they could get healthy food. That doesn't even include the barrier of how they're going to pay for it when they get there. It's just getting them there, which was, a real issue. And then, and I think that, and I noticed one of the other things that I thought was really interesting working that population is that, folks from the rural areas, they'll shop for a week if they can. I mean, they'll stock up, and we'll go and we'll get a membership to a Sam's Club or a Costco, something that will give you that bulk membership for that better pricing. And you'll have these voyages every 3 months or so into these warehouse to shop and buy stuff at a cheaper price or a better value. But what I noticed in urban populations, a lot of folks would just shop on the day, every day, going to the grocery store, which I just found the most interesting. You go to the grocery store every day, they're like, well, to get dinner. And I'm like, that was every day, that kind of model was very different versus, being in the rural area. Those are some things I noticed about food access, for sure, that the
I
differences
love
around.
that. And
Yeah.
so before we go on to the next, now when you think about air quality, because I know most people don't really think about air quality, but like you said, in the medical field, I'm pretty sure you have noticed different situations, and air quality definitely has had something to do with that. So I always use the example like where I live, I'm right behind the peanut butter factory. And so one of my daughters, she is convinced it is popcorn. So I just got a peanut butter popcorn. And my
Oh,
other daughter, like you can smell the popcorn. And then other times, like I can tell when it's extra smoky or like when they burnt the popcorn, because that's when we hear more fire trucks. We can see it more smoggy wise in the air. And so I just want to hear a little bit about if you've noticed anything similar to that, and how would you explain that if you did see anything?
well, I would tell you like air quality is a little bit out of my range of expertise, so I can't really share on, air quality factually. I can anecdotally, where you have larger populations, you're probably going to have more automobiles and more factories that are, producing contaminants in the air. So you may expect more, pollution in the air. If you think about Los Angeles with all the smog and all that they have there, in rural communities, though, I mean, you don't have as much of that as an issue. I mean, the biggest thing I will warn you, my family has been in the coal business for 120 years. So I'm a son of the Kentucky's coal business that, burning coal, clean technology to burn coal reduces the carbon emissions, but carbon emissions do happen without scrubbers and things to clean that. So I will warn you on those things, but I'm not really an authority on air quality. But I will tell you anecdotally, since moving back to Kentucky, that my seasonal allergies, the runny noses, and the things I have experienced a resurgent of seasonal allergies like never before. I mean, I was a child when I had these so bad that multiple therapies is not ending it, and I think that what makes Kentucky such a natural beauty with all of its botanical diversity is what really contributes to all of the allergies and things that we have. That's something I've noticed different since moving back compared to living in North Carolina and even living in other parts of Kentucky, like the Lexington and Northern Kentucky part, that I've noticed it more.
I like that. See, that's perfect. And I'm not like, I'm not aficionado on that either. And that's why I say I just go with what I learned and what I understand about it, because our viewers are going to be from everywhere. Some will never even have heard of Kentucky, and so we want to give them our understanding of it and our best representation of it, because everybody understands different things differently. Even if you have 10 people, they're all going to hear it differently, they're all going to receive it differently. And so I always believe keeping it as BAM as possible, keeping it as open. And it's good that we have the stats, and I'm pretty sure I'll eventually find someone that's very analytical about it and can give me all the things. But I like these better because it's more fresh. So before we get into the really fun part of it, because the summer meals is very important when it comes to your hopes for your community. And when I say your community, that can mean a couple of communities, because as we have established, you got a few. Also, with you trying to really get the mayor on board to bring the mobile market, and how we as a community can help you in that regard too. So that's kind of like two separate situations, but you just answer that the best way you want to answer it and you feel comfortable to answer it, and then we'll go on from there.
I'm going to give you my spiel. I'm going to start from the beginning. My job is ensuring kids in Kentucky have access to the adequate nutrition they need to grow, learn, and thrive every day of the year. I think about every Kentucky child as my child, and I think about community. When I think about communities, I think really at the county level in Kentucky. Feeding Kentucky is focused on creating a hunger-free Kentucky, and Kentucky Kids Eat aligns with that mission of what we do through Feeding Kentucky by connecting kids to healthy foods 365 days a year. what we're hoping to achieve by connecting kids to healthy foods every day is that we want food security for every child, every day, every county. That to end child hunger, it is going to require every child have food security. And we look at that at like we want it at the county level for every child. In Kentucky, we have and Map the Meal Gap, which is the annual study released by Feeding America that gives you local level estimates of food insecurity as well as food costs. Just came out maybe a couple weeks ago in May, with which this year's release provided us updated data for the year 2023. And what it showed us, or what it suggested, was that the number of kids who are estimated, and this is the definition of food insecurity, to lack access at times to enough food, enough food. I mean, that's just what that sticks in my head when I say that, for a healthy life. At times, enough food, they didn't have enough food, had risen to nearly over 213,000 children in Kentucky, or 21.1% of the population of Kentucky under the age of 18. That's 1 in 5 Kentucky children who don't have enough to eat at some point during the year to really reach their full potential. Now, when you look at where these children that are experiencing food insecurity live, every county in Kentucky is home to some of these children that lack access to enough food. And how we go about making sure, because not every child who is food insecure goes on to develop hunger or experience hunger. We know food insecurity kind of sets the stage for hunger to be a potential outcome, but not every child who's food insecure goes on to experience the hunger. And that's because we have federal child nutrition programs that reduce food insecurity, such as school meals, summer meals, after school meals. There's a child nutrition program that could feed a child almost 24 hours a day at different points in the day if you really wanted to. Kind of the recipe to feed all these children. Those programs help reduce the number of food insecure kids that go on to develop hunger. But also, so do charitable food assistance programs, such as that's provided by our member food banks and their partner pantries in counties across the state. And a lot of our food banks offer food child hunger program relief programs as well. So through those federal child nutrition programs and charitable food assistance, we're able to keep some of those kids, or a portion of those kids, from going on to develop hunger. Now, nationally, Healthy People 2030, which I think it's our Department for Health and Human Services at the national level, sets up goals to improve the public health of the nation every 10 years. And there is goals around food insecurity as part of the Healthy People 2020-30 objectives. One of those is, if you think about food insecurity as a range, like people in food security and insecurity is a state of being. You either are or you're not. You're either food insecure or you're not food insecure. But under food security, there's two different kind of ranges of food security, where you have high food security and marginal food security, both of which are considered to be part of food security, being a food secured person. When you get into food insecurity, there's two categories. There is one called low food security, and then the next one is called very low food security. And really, when you look at what defines those characteristics or those types of food insecurity, it's those folks who experience very low food insecurity at the household level that have members within their home that experience hunger. So, and usually children are the last to experience hunger in households that have very low food security, because the adults will generally shield them by going hungry first and letting the child eat. So that usually children are the last in the household to go to develop hunger. When you look at the USDA data around food insecurity, particularly very low food security, that's the most severe form. Kentucky ranks third in the nation for the highest prevalence rate of very low food security. I think it's like 6.3%. So we know we have a higher than national average burden of people who are living in households with the most severe form of food insecurity. So, as part of those objectives, one of those objectives is to eliminate that most severe form of very low food insecurity in households with children is the objective. So to eliminate very low food insecurity in households with children is one of the objectives of 2020-30. So nationally, to improve the public's health, we want to eliminate that category, which 6.3% of Kentucky's families are there, so we have a little work to do. When it comes to reducing food insecurity, and that's, sets the stage for hunger, they want to reduce that by 6% by the year 2030. And like I said, 21.1% of Kentucky children were considered food insecure in 2023. So we have a ways to go to try to work there. What we need is, during the school year, most all Kentucky schools participate in the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program, and a lot of them participate in something called the Community Eligibility Option that eliminates that cost barrier to provide access to school lunch and school breakfast. Research has shown that school lunch and school breakfast is really the most nutritious food source for America's children. I mean, it provides better nutrients and qualities and adds to diet quality more than any other meal from another source. So we know that school meals, if they're provided through those USDA programs, National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program, we know kids are getting adequate nutrition, because food insecurity is not only about access to food, but food that provides you the adequate nutrition that you need. School meals do that. And for most of the year in Kentucky, for those 213,000 children that don't always have access to enough food at home, school meals play a critical role in making sure those kids don't go hungry. But school meals also play an important role for all children in just improving the quality of their diets. I mean, it provides more nutrients and vitamins than other meals. But here's the kicker. School's only in session for 9 months out of the year. Most school districts end their school year in May, and they don't fire back up until August, leaving kids without access to summer meals or school meals over the summer months. And summer, typically, because your food insecurity risk goes higher, you don't have access to school meals, summer can be the hungriest time of year for kids. And I came into this position about a year and a half ago, but the work that Feeding Kentucky and the Kentucky Kids Eat program has done, through our partnership with No Kid Hungry, it goes back a decade, trying to end the complex issue of summer hunger among children when school's out of session. And we continue to work on this now. The USDA has, done some thinking about their summer meal programs, and we had a new federal law, the Consolidation Appropriations of 2022, kind of expanded what summer meal programs look like. Because for over 50 years, you had summer meal sites that required children to come into a site or to a mobile thing or a mobile unit to eat together, one meal at a time, which historically was not reaching, rural children of Appalachia because of the transportation barriers and different obstacles. The work schedules won't allow them to come, not only once a day, but twice a day to come in to get these meals. So the reach was very limited with congregant only summer meals, which was offered for about 50 years. The Consolidation Appropriation Act of 2022 changed all that. They gave us the option, particularly in rural communities or in communities that are designated rural by the USDA, that summer meal sponsors can provide what are called non-congregate summer meals that can be picked up by parents, can include multi-day issuances, or they can be home delivered. So we have seen, because of this Some Meals to Go or these rural non-congregate summer meals, we have seen summer meals expand its reach among children who live in rural areas of Kentucky to reaching 25%, or 1 out of 4 rural kids that are eligible for free and reduced price school meals during the school year are now being reached by summer meals thanks to the non-congregate option. It's changing the game in Kentucky. But now for our children who are living in, areas that are designated urban, which in Kentucky, every county, all 120 counties have areas that have been designated rural by the USDA that could be potential sites for non-congregate summer meals. But in 17 or 18 counties that got urban designation by the USDA, where the non-congregate option is not available to those children. And what that has caused to happen in particularly areas of Louisville, Lexington, where there's more diversity, if you will, is we're seeing an increased disparity between access to summer meal kids in rural Kentucky, which is generally non-Hispanic, white largely, and then the children of more diverse African American or Hispanic populations in urban areas reducing. So while we're reaching 25% of rural kids eligible for free and reduced price school meals with summer meals now, we're losing the battle when it comes to in our urban areas where we dropped to under 6% of those children that we're reaching. So how do we change this? Well, how we reach more kids, we have a model, and I talked about food security every day, every child, every county. Well, our approach to eliminating summer hunger is that we want really summer meals. We need sites in every county. We need sponsors to serve every county because last year we had 4 counties that had no summer meal sites. So our first hurdle is getting a summer meal sponsor in at least every county. And our second hurdle is getting those sponsors to offer sites that run the duration from the time the school year ends to the time it opens. We are nowhere near where we need to be with that level of access to summer meals, and now referred to as some meals go in Kentucky. So, if I could say the way we can change this is I need every county to have summer meal access from the time the schools close in that county to the time they reopen. There's very few that do it. We have a handful of sponsors that operate sites in May when school's mostly in. Most sites sponsors pick up sites in June and July, but then end of July sites start ending while school year don't start back till mid of August. So we need to get every county a sponsor, and then we need to get sponsors operating sites summer long in all those counties. All right, and taking advantage of both of these options that are working to meet those needs. We know it's estimated that about 568,000 Kentucky children are eligible for free and reduced price school meals during the school year. And the new SUN programs, or the USDA summer nutrition programs for kids, are intended to replace the meals that these children lose whenever school goes out of session. We're only reaching slightly over 100,000 of those children. So we have a lot of ways to go. We're breaking records for summer meals. Over 8.1 million summer meals were served last year through 179 organizations serving as sponsors through about 2,200 meal sites in Kentucky. But we still, only 100,000, maybe 104,000 children got reached, and there's 568,000 to get to. There is still significant room for expansion. We're nowhere near solving that issue. But now summer meals, and starting now through August, there's various tools like the USDA site finder that will help people find local summer meal sites in their county. Just beware, your availability and length of those sites are going to vary by county significantly because we don't have counties consistently from county to county with those summer long access. So just be aware of that if you do. But there's a third component to the summer nutrition programs, or a third program that is intended to work with summer meal programs to really help fill that void. Because, we're only reaching about historically 1 in 6. And that is something called summer EBT, which still goes by summer EBT in Kentucky. In other states, it is known as SunBucks. But it is a benefit, and it provides an EBT card or electronic benefit transfer card that will provide eligible families who meet income guidelines $120 for grocery buying or grocery purchasing benefit per child during the summer to cover really May, June, July, and August, the 3 months you're not getting school meal access. Now, we commend Kentucky for being a state that really adopted high level adoptions of the community eligibility provision, which makes summer meals free for every child, regardless of income, in over 93% of Kentucky schools. But because of that, families don't do that free and reduced application anymore. And free and reduced applications are part of what streamlines certified kids or automatically certified kids for summer EBT. Now, kids who have received SNAP, KTAP, kinship care, and certain forms of income-based Medicaid for at least 1 month after August 1st, 2024, those kids will automatically get summer EBT. the children of families that did free and reduced applications in Kentucky schools, and there's only about 140 Kentucky schools that do not participate in CP, so the number of schools that are still doing free and reduced forms are very small. But if you did in those schools, you would be streamlined certified because of that application. But the vast majority of Kentucky schools being CEP means that we have some eligible kids who need to apply and must apply to get this benefit. If they don't, they won't get it. And last year, that's what happened. There was estimates of anywhere from about 150,000 to 200,000 eligible kids in Kentucky that did not get summer EBT simply because they didn't apply or didn't know that they needed to apply. So what we're doing through No Kid Hungry is, and Feeding Kentucky and the Kentucky Kids Eat program, is we're not only promoting those summer meal sites, find summer meal sites, find something that feeds you. We're also promoting summer EBT because it adds that grocery buying benefit, and it's been shown to reduce the most severe form of food insecurity by a third. This program and its demonstration products, but where it's really critically important, you remember I talked about those urban areas that didn't have access to those multi-day issuances and the non-congregate summer meals. For our urban kids that don't have ready access to those congregate sites, they can't walk to a site by themselves in, downtown Louisville for a meal twice a day. Their parents scared about their safety and security. Well, the EBT card, summer EBT cards, would be very critical for those children because they need that to be able to provide groceries on their own. So between summer meal programs and summer EBT, we're hoping that these programs will work in complementary and tandem fashion to help reach more kids who need the adequate nutrition provided by the federal child nutrition program, Some Meals and Some Meals to Go during the summer months. That's a long way to get to where my explanation of what you asked me, but I just wanted to give you some background on where we were with everything and what drives why I do what I do.
No, I love it. Now, when this part comes, this is the scenic route, and it should be because, like I said, there's gonna be a lot of people that hear this that ain't even from this state and might even want to incorporate some of this into their own cities because I'm pretty sure their numbers are even higher because our state's not that big. But even with those numbers are insane to me. Like it hits me, like it makes me feel like, yeah, because when you say 500 and some thousand, but only 100 and some thousand is getting hit, like that math ain't mathing. Like, and even if we don't feed every child, because I know that that's going to be hard to hit that whole number, I still rather it be in the 300,000s, 400,000 region, because of course it's a process, right? Like even how
Yeah.
you've explained everything, this has been over a decade. It's been over a decade, right? And when we're still not where we need to be. So of course, as you progress in anything, and this isn't just for feeding, this is with anything in life. Every day you get better. Every year you grow a little bit more, you understand a little bit more. But for us only not even hitting 200,000 yet, there are definitely some gaps.
Well, the summer EBT reached that through auto issuance and the applications that did receive, they did reach about 395,000 students with summer EBT benefits. So we got a good chunk of them. It's just that there were 600,000 children estimated in Kentucky to be eligible for this benefit. So using that estimated total versus the number of students that actually got it last year was how we estimated where we lost kids. But I'm going to take this back even further. All right. So we're talking about feeding children, and granted, we recognize that, the primary responsibility to take care and feed a child rests with their parents or their guardians. But we live in an equitable society where folks don't have the equal resources to be able to provide and feed their children. That is just the state of the reality that we're in. And when that happens, someone has to step up and feed children. I mean, we're talking about feeding children. Now, in every other country than the United States, children have the basic right to adequate food. And it came in I think the 60s or 40s was part of the end of World War II, the agreement. But, everywhere else, children have a basic right to food, which means when the country recognize that for your assigned zone, the government accepts responsibility to feed their children when it's not provided. That is the kind of the human rights violation of child hunger, if you will, in the United States. So we're violating a basic human right. Also, humans need really two or three things to just exist. You need food, water, and air. They're physiologic needs that, these are cornerstones to just being a human. So when those needs aren't met, it also becomes a health crisis or a public health crisis, because then we know we're stunting growth, we're impairing cognitive development. We are then producing children who achieve less, lower educational attainment. They may drop out of school or have to repeat a grade. They ended up graduating with less educational requirements, so their earning potentials as adults are lower, and they have chronic problems from their hunger as a child that leads to disability and chronic disease as an adult. So, I mean, it repeats this cycle of poverty, hunger, poverty. Okay. We're also, remind you, talking about feeding children. All right. To make sure a kid has enough to eat from having a conscience as a human being, it is the humanitarian and just the social moral right thing to do. That when we're debating about whether or not we're going to feed children, I mean, I want people to say, think about what we're talking about here. Think about it, like to have a conscience. And then the other thing that gets me really fired up, because we know that, hungry children do not learn as well as a child that is well fed and well nourished. So child hunger becomes an educational issue, if you will, and really a first development issue, because they're just not producing folks that are ready, or college and career ready, to roll out into the world. But we as a society think public education or a child having an education is so important that we mandate it. So children between ages 6 to 18, they have to be in school. They have to get an education. All right. And we will provide you a bus to get you there. We will, if you need tutors, we'll get you a tutor. We'll provide you every possible resource to make sure you're ready to get the most out of that education, except food. We want to ensure our kids get food. So they're starting eat from the starting line. When they're not fed, they're hungry. They're not going to get the most out of that education that we're devoting all these resources to and mandating that they get it. That's also a reality check. Like, are these kids really at the maximum level of school readiness to get the most out of that education we're mandating and putting all these other resources in to address? So I mean, like, of all the things that you want, to talk about, and there's simple things that schools can do to really, help end hunger. And it's really a scheduling shift. Offer breakfast, school breakfast, instead of doing it before the bell, do it after the bell. Because that eliminates, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, socializing with your friends, maybe bus schedules that didn't work, the stigma that breakfast before the bell is only for poor children. Just moving it after the bell, which our state law, thanks to the Barriers to Breakfast bill, which passed in 2022, we have a state law, Kentucky revised statutes, that allow superintendents to authorize up to 15 minutes of instructional time for kids to eat breakfast. We have nobody I don't know of that's using that recommendation that we worked so hard to get passed, because only about 21% of the school breakfast sites provided breakfast after the bell model. And then when you do it after the bell, breakfast has been served in the cafeteria for 50 years. We're only reaching about half of Kentucky children. Just like summer meals wasn't getting the job done, just by that congregate setting, we need to think about breakfast. That, hey, this cafeteria model is not getting it done here, folks. And offer breakfast either in the classroom, where participation can get up to like 88% of students. You can get in the hallway. So, like, if children walk in and they're told to go to the gym, or they're just can't get to the cafeteria because it's on the outside of the school, having a cart there to greet them at the door with breakfast, that increases participation. Or that's called grab and go or hallway breakfast. Or either if you're high school kids that maybe aren't hungry first thing in the morning, but get hungry later in the morning, they provide them a second chance option to get breakfast before first and second period. Those are ways you can all make sure kids are getting really adequate nutrition that they need, that the school breakfast provides. But when you look at the data around school breakfast, they get academic benefits, health benefits. There's even talking about suicide prevention benefits if they eat school breakfast. There are a lot of positive benefits from doing those scheduling shifts. And even what's even more interesting is we are missing out on 96 to 133 million dollars in additional federal funding that could be trickling down through our Kentucky schools via meal reimbursements by making sure more kids eat breakfast. So they really, it pays for itself. All these benefits, they're clearly academic health, achievement, mental health benefits of breakfast, and it pays for itself. I mean, like, you literally, if you just change it and you're going to bring more money in that federal funding to support your school food authority. There's a song about a country song I think of in the 90s about here's your sign, here's your sign. And I want to like get a billboard for legislators and schools and folks and say, here's your sign. Here's all the things you're mentioning about school breakfast. This is a no brainer, folks. Roll this out. It pays for itself. We can get more kids to eat breakfast. We can help solve hunger, bring more money into Kentucky schools. And we don't have to look any further than our neighbor to the east, West Virginia, for an example of a state that really took proaction to make that happen. In 2013, they passed West Virginia Feed to Achieve that really required states to think about school breakfast, providing equitable access to school breakfast by requiring schools to do an alternative breakfast model. As a result of this legislation that passed in 2013, for the last decade, West Virginia has led the nation in school breakfast participation at over 80% of their students that participate in it. It has increased millions of dollars coming into West Virginia schools. We're 30% about 30% less than that on participation at the school breakfast level than West Virginia. And all it takes is just passing some legislation around breakfast bill with some teeth to bring more money, get more health benefits, more academic benefits, and help end child hunger. I mean, does it not sound like a no-brainer to you?
Such a no-brainer. So, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And we will definitely have to do a part 2 of this because this is amazing. Like this, and I've been in food for a little bit and I'm learning, but this is a whole nother layer. And this is a whole nother that I definitely want to go into depth when we have more time for sure. But this is just amazing. This is like it's kind of having my eyes water up a little bit just because of people don't really know this. And I know a lot. I know a lot of people. And so when people are like, when I don't know something, there's a problem. And that's not me just saying that. A lot of people say that because I am very involved in my community. I'm very involved in the legislating and that kind of stuff because I believe just as passionately as you believe about feeding kids, I also believe we should feed their minds. We should feed their souls. We should make them know that they matter and that they're important and their education is important and not just the school education, but stuff like this, education like this, all of it's important. And there's not one over
Social
the other.
capital, that social capital experience to feel like they
And that's
belong
why,
in a thing.
when I think about like why I'm so passionate, why I'm where I'm at, it started with my parents, especially my dad. Like he was just that, and he never said, I need you to understand it like this, or I need you to this. I just felt like he was the example. And whatever I received from that, it was how I received it. But he was the example, he was the model of it. And that's what we need to be. We need to be the example. We need to be the model. So when kids are growing up, they're getting all different information and whatever they choose to follow, that's their choice. But we have to give them something different. We have to give them something different to strive for. And a lot of times they do not get that. That's why it's another reason why and even what you're saying, it'll lower suicide prevention and all that type of stuff. People don't even think about that.
I will tell you, if there was one downside to growing up in Appalachia, growing up as a gay man in Appalachia was the bullying and what I dealt with. There's trauma and PTSD that I deal with today just from growing up different in the mountains. That I think about it today, and I can just remember. I played basketball, so I was putting my stuff on full display for everyone to cheer. And I remember vividly in the district tournament, and I'm out on the floor. We're playing a rival in my district, and the pep section from that high school started chanting the F word while I'm shooting a free throw, and I just kept hearing, that come out, and I was like, somebody make that stop. Nobody's gonna let that continue. And I, to this day, I can still hear them chanting that word, and it just kept, and no one was making it stop. That I was like, there's real trauma. I mean, and I think if we can do anything in Appalachia, it is, letting kids feel like, I didn't feel like I belonged or I was accepted, and still struggled with it into my 30s to accept who I was, because it was such a traumatic experience growing up there that I totally get that, because I didn't know where I belonged. I not only being gay, but I grew up with means in an area that didn't have families with means. That, I mean, it was there was just a lot of factors that at play that really, impeded my experience as a child. Some people, viewed it as my defense mechanism was to keep my distance from folks and not really get close, because I didn't want to let people in. But really struggling with that as an adult, to learn how to develop healthy and strong relationships from that experience. And I think probably I've become very passionate about other people's needs because of that. But there was one defining experience that I think probably defined who it was. I had parents that were a service of others, and it was in the second grade. You know how the parents would come in to eat Thanksgiving dinner with their children. And that particular year, she came, it was 1985, 86, because I remember I was in second grade. Virginia Hall, now Harold was my teacher. Last name changed, but Harold got married after I was in a class. And my mom came to school that day, and it was, mid morning, came to eat lunch with me. And she was so distracted. And I kept noticing, like, she wasn't paying me any attention, but she was looking somewhere in that cafeteria. So later that afternoon, my mom came to pick me up from school, and we had a Buick at that time, and it had these red leather seats, and in the back of those seats was just bags of clothing and a comforter and just different means. And she didn't say a word. I got in the car and we drove to the home of one of my classmates, and she literally just started taking stuff to the door and giving it to them. We never spoke a word of it. I knew instinctually I was never to bring this up. I mean, I just knew that for whom God has given so much is expected in return. That was just a natural instinct of what we were supposed to do. If have many blessings, you're supposed to return that in favor to others, and that really has shaped my life. I think about that second grade experience quite a lot, and being a service to others. And I hope when my final day comes, that folks said, he mattered in the life of some other person. He was a service to other. And a lot of my work has been in around improving the life of children. I have no children myself, so my body of work is to improve things for them at the collective level.
You are so amazing. So I don't even know how to end this, like, for real, because it's so, like, liberating and so just
My battery on my
like,
phone's going to go dead where my computer won't work, so it might end on its own.
I know, right? So, like, how I end every podcast is, I truly hope whoever hears this, whenever you hear this, that you will hear, as the old people say. I know you hearing me, but are you listening? I hope they really listen and find something that will benefit their lives mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and will take it to the powers that be in any part of your state, wherever this goes, however far this goes. So we can work together, fight together, no matter what state you're in, to show that we are on one accord when it comes to not only taking care of everyone, but especially kids. That's a no-brainer, right? Like you said, it's a no-brainer. These are children. Why are we even having a conversation? Why are we
Why are
even
we
need to fight
sensitive?
about this? Like, these are kids that are supposed to be our future, which a lot of the powers that be, they will run on kids, 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 kids. Like, they will use that like no other. But then we have to fight for kids to eat. And it's like Scooby-Doo moment. Like, that isn't, how does that work? Like, kids are important, but we have to show that. We have to be the embodiment of that, and not just by what we say. Like, your body of work will show that you really care. And I would ask the legislators, what does your body of work show?
Before I end, I want to make sure I share where folks can get more information and resources. First off, if anyone has questions today or needs help, you can reach me by email at johnjohn at feeding, FEEDINGKY.org, or by telephone at 502-209-7461. If you go to our website, the Feeding Kentucky website, feeding, FEEDINGKY.org, and click on our programs tab, you will find a drop down box that says child hunger relief. And out from that, you will find information on both summer EBT, where Kentucky Kids Eat, and then the summer EBT and summer meal programs, which will provide you more information, including an eligibility screener to see if you're eligible for summer EBT, as well as information if you need to apply, and the link to apply online through our Department for Community-Based Services. On the summer meal side of things, you will find resources, a telephone number in both English and Spanish for the USDA Hunger Hotline, which will help folks connect them with a live representative from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern Time to help you find resources for food. They also have a texting option that you can text food or SFSP to the number and get an automated response 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to find summer meal sites in your community. There's the USDA site finder tool we have uploaded on that website. So we have a ton of resources to help you around summer meals. I just want to tell folks though, if you are eligible for summer meals or for summer EBT, you or someone else in your household where that eligible child lives could be eligible for other nutrition assistance programs such as SNAP and WIC. If you have a child under the age of 5 that lives in the home of a summer EBT eligible child, contact your local health department to make an appointment to discuss whether you're eligible for WIC. All right, local health department numbers you should be easily to find. If you are eligible for summer EBT or a child's eligible, you may also want to check your eligibility for SNAP, which you can do that through the KY Connect website to help you with that. We have an outreach person through Feeding Kentucky that just came on board. Her name is Chelsea Brock, that can help you with your summer EBT outreach if you need it. Her email is Chelsea, CHELSEY, at feedingky.org. Let me get Chelsea's number for you so folks will have that as well, because she can help you do enrollment in the programs if you need it. And her telephone number is 502-209-9592. And that's to reach Chelsea Brock, our new outreach coordinator that can help you enroll in SNAP if you need it. I think I've covered all my bases today.
You are so amazing. I love it. And with all that, we out.